Today is November 26, 1987. My name is Stephen Cohn. My colleague is Myrna Wiener. The videographer today is Barry Stallman. We are here to interview Mr. Lia Loebenberg, who is a survivor of the Holocaust. We are making this video under the auspices of the Montreal Holocaust Memorial Center. The purpose of this interview is to add to the oral history of the Holocaust. Good morning, Mr. Loebenberg.
Good morning, good morning.
Can you tell me where you live, please?
I'm living at 987 White Street in Saint-Laurent, apartment 505.
Your phone number?
747-7070.
Okay. When were you born?
Quite a while back. On the 18th of December, 1919.
And where were you born?
I was born in a town called Wächtersbach, which is in Germany, near Frankfurt. In fact, it is between Frankfurt and another town, which is better known. Its name is Fulda, Frankfurt. It's right in between. It's a small town. It is maybe 300-400 people. The population is about that size.
Do you remember how many Jewish families there might have been there?
Maybe 20, 25 or thereabouts.
Small community.
Yes, very small, yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you have memories of your childhood growing up there, what it was like?
Yes. In fact, we were playing, the Jewish boys, there were several of course, they were playing with their Christian friends. They went to school, they went to public school there, playing together and living quite comfortably.
Was the school a school that also had non-Jewish children?
It was basically a non-Jewish school. It was a public
school.
Yes.
German public school.
Absolutely, yes.
Did you play with non-Jewish children as well?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You had some friends, some real friends who were German and Christian?
Some we were playing football or whatever, we were playing together. We had more intimate relations with the Jewish boys.
Did you have any Jewish education?
Yes, I went to school, Hebrew school, which was actually not a full-time school. Public school was a full-time school. It was afternoon school. We had there a Hebrew teacher and teaching religion, history, and that was taking place in the community building, which was a synagogue, very fine synagogue.
You had a community building in such a small...
Oh, absolutely. Surprisingly enough, looking like a synagogue. You know, it was not just a modified type of an office floor or whatever. It was a synagogue building with a balcony for the ladies because it was an Orthodox community, and all the rest of it. Plus an adjacent building, small building, containing the school and the mikvah. Even a mikvah? Absolutely, yes. So.
Did you feel a sense of Jewish community? To have a synagogue is one thing. With the small number of families, did these families interact as Jews?
Definitely. First of all, they went to services.
So this was
a big thing.
An organizing...
Oh, yes. They went to services, certainly on Saturdays and Shabbat, and on the holidays. And, well, you know, there was a greater affinity towards Jewish people who knew each other. Families knew each other, of course.
Although you were a child, do you have any memories of how the non-Jewish population might have responded or felt towards the Jews in their midst who went to their own synagogue and you say seemed to have a sense of Jewish community? What was it like?
I say when I was before Hitler, I wasn't even conscious about this. Automatically, we were Jews, and they went to their churches, mainly Protestant, smaller community of Catholics, and they lived together quite peacefully. They were clients, people who bought in my father's store.
What did your father do?
He was a merchant. He had a general store where you could buy everything from soup to nuts.
Soup to nuts?
In, dry goods.
Clothing?
Clothing, not finished clothing. No. Materials for
cloth.
making, yes, cloth, yes. Food items, not vegetables, but and also hardware, mainly also hardware. Even beams, steel beams, all kind of stuff, construction materials. So this store served the larger community, not only the hometown of mine, but beyond that. People came. And
good relationships?
So my father had good relationships with these people, very good. In fact, he was on the city council. Apart from having been the president of the shul, the community, he was also on the city council, if you call it a city. Yeah. Oh yes, so he was well respected. And my grandmother was living there, my father's mother, very fine lady. I remember very well I had to buy the German newspaper for her every day. Went somewhere to buy it, which she was reading. And the language at home was German. There was no other language, in fact.
But did you have other family, brothers or sisters?
Yes. I had two sisters, and I still have two sisters. They're alive today. They're living in New York. And sure, and one of my sisters went to school every morning taking a train at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning, going to a neighboring town near Frankfurt, closer to Hanau. Oh no, actually the town where she went to school was the town was called Offenbach.
Why did it happen that that school was necessary? Was there no other school for her there?
Well, there was not of the. This was a high school of a different, a better class school. My father sent her there. See, so she went there until she left Germany, and my father sent her away.
What was your home life like? Did your mother stay at home?
Yes. Yeah, my mother
she was a housekeeper.
The house, yes. My dad and a grandmother and my older sister, they looked after the business, and so that was it. Oh, beautiful home life. I mean, that's why I knew it. That's why I grew up, and which was suddenly, so to speak, interrupted when all this disappeared.
Was there any Yiddish that was spoken in home?
No. You see, the German Jews in general did not speak Yiddish. They they spoke German. No, they didn't know Yiddish. They didn't know how to speak German. No.
Did you go to synagogue every Saturday morning?
Absolutely, yes. Oh, yes.
Now, for you, when did you become aware that there were some things that were changing? Do you remember how old you were, or what event might have?
It might have been, yes. Came the time when we heard songs being sung of anti-Semitic songs, killing the Jews and so forth, Then,
what did you think of that the first time you heard that?
Well, it was one realized slowly, I mean, as a child, but certainly my parents and everybody else in the community, they knew what was coming up. I think they felt what was coming up.
Did your father talk to you, or did you hear him talking to your mother about his concerns?
I don't think they ever thought it would go as far as it went. Because my father was born there, and his father was born in that town. he was part of the town. He was living there.
You
amongst
said
its small
your
community.
father was on the town council, so he
Absolutely,
was
yes.
a member of the community.
Yes, most definitely. Very well respected. When people need some aids, you know, some information, that's where they went, you know.
The people, you said that you heard people, was this men and women or boys singing songs about killing Jews? Do you remember?
Mainly men.
Men.
And eventually they dressed also, we saw them marching in uniform, in SA uniform, singing. Bunch of bumps, drunkards. You know.
How old do you remember yourself being when that was? Because there's some way you can date
I would
it.
imagine, yes, 1932, 3, thereabouts. Yes.
So you would have been about 13 or 14 years of age.
Yes, well, that's correct, because I left, I was just bar mitzvah, and eventually I left. My father sent me away in his great wisdom.
Your father sent you away after your bar mitzvah.
Yeah, yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I did have an uncle, his brother, in Paris. And he had sent my sister, my younger sister, to Paris 1 year before I left. Once I went to Paris, she went to London, and I went to Paris in I think it was about 33, 34. And I stayed there till 39.
Now, why, let's try and understand this. Your younger sister went before you. Do you know why she went to Paris? Why she was sent?
Oh, absolutely. The reason was exactly the same why I went away. The reason was the oncoming tragedy, which my father had realized. We were too small, maybe. I was too small, maybe, to grasp the extent of this tragedy. But the Jewish people realized that, you know, some windows were broken then. We heard of, you know, I knew, for instance, that one of the member of the community, Jewish community, was interned, sent away, imprisoned in what became a major and famous or infamous concentration camp by name of Dachau. But he came back later on, and that family went, eventually they went to the States also. So many realized then what was coming, and somehow they must have influenced each other, and they went away. They immigrated from, they went away, all of them. Very few were actually caught in this tragedy.
So your sister went to Paris, and then a year later you went to Paris, and your sister went to London.
Absolutely.
Who did you stay with in Paris? Who did your sister stay with in London?
Right. I stayed, so did my sister, in Paris with my uncle, the brother of my father. And he was living there, I don't know when he went there, early, 1800, I don't know. And so we went there, and he was a well-off businessman in the oil refining business, Paris. And I was there. His wife, unfortunately, had passed away, so he had a cook and a housekeeper. And they were living there with his 3 children, and it was a wonderful relationship. My uncle was a wonderful man.
Why did it happen that your sister went to London? Are you aware of what happened there?
Yes, I think the basic reason was that my father wanted to send me away to Paris, and 2 in one family wasn't possible.
He didn't want to impose, you're saying, on your uncle.
To that extent, right.
And who did your sister stay with in England?
She stayed with some other remote relatives who came from this nearby larger town of Fulda, originating from that town. And they lived in London, and were doing very well in the metal business. And they eventually left London in spite of their well-being and went to Israel at that time.
Oh.
Yes, settled in Haifa. Yeah.
And did your sister stay in London?
No, my sister, as a matter of my older sister, later on also left for London, and there were 2 sisters in London at the time. And after a while, they were able to immigrate to the States. They came to New York, and they were at the
Was
time.
this during the war that they
That was
went?
before the war.
Before the war, they
Everything
went to
was
America.
before the war. Oh yes, they came to America before the war, and we had a second cousin of my father's in New York. He was wonderful in helping them initially to settle down, and they are still living in New York.
That's
Their
wonderful.
husbands passed away, but they are still alive, living in New York.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Now, you were living in Paris. You were in your teenage years then. This was before the war.
Mhm.
What was life like for you at that time?
I should say that it was very pleasant in general. Very pleasant.
Did
I
you continue?
eventually got over the shock of having left my immediate family. I was alone there. I mean, after all, in some ways, when I knew all these people, I was the poor refugee from Germany, you know.
Mhm.
So, but in the overall, the people were very kind, and it took me no time to speak to learn French in no time, because we started learning French as a first foreign language in Germany very early in the game, but we were very small. Then English was a second language later. So I knew French quite well, certainly the grammar. So when I came to France, of course, I must say I didn't understand a word, even though I knew the language. But nobody talked to me any other language but French, so it didn't take me 6 months or so, and
Were you studying?
I went to high school. I went to a school called Lycée Janson de Sailly, and I went there, and very nice.
Did you encounter any anti-Semitism
In Paris?
in Paris?
No, I didn't really. I didn't. Nobody. No, not the people I knew thought of anything. Never realizing that eventually it will come a day when the Germans would come to Paris. I mean, it was not conceivable. As a matter of fact, those French Jews were more Catholic, more French than unbelievable. Now, the interesting part of it was my uncle was an Orthodox man, and we went to a small community on Friday nights and to services. These were actually Sephardic Jews at the time, and they were of the school, the Alliance Israélite. They were Moroccan Jews, and they were there. It was very interesting. In fact, I think it was somewhere on the estate of Rothschild, next to where we were living. That's where this synagogue was, this small. On Saturday, we went to, and we walked, I should say, to another synagogue further away in the Rue de Montevideo. Lovely, small synagogue built with Jews. So it happens also, they came from Germany at the time, but earlier in the century, earlier. Very well off. As a matter of one family was the Wiles. Weil used to be people in the perfume business. And you could buy that stuff, the perfume all over the place, including Canada. And I remember in the States, as a matter of fact, I remember I went with my wife to New York, and I knew that the Wiles were there. I went there and I got some perfume. And which had evaporated by the time we got back, because I opened the bottle. I didn't know. Anyhow, so these people subsidized that synagogue on that, and it was absolutely lovely. And I do remember, the funny part of it was that there was a very lovely chazan there. And surely enough, that
A chazan is someone who sings.
A chazan is someone
Hebrew song
who
and
officiates at the services in the synagogue. Okay. Now this man, one fine day, I see him here, Montreal, at Bethora. He was
synagogue
engaged
here.
he came here. I was the only one who knew him at the time. It was really something to see that man. Since then he left, and there were 3 others in the meantime, and he went to Israel. But to meet that man was really... there was also, I remember a rabbi, I remember his sermons on Saturday morning, Rabbi Langer, and he ended up in New York also after this whole schlamazel.
Did you, when you were living in Paris, did you wonder if your parents would join you there as well, your mother and father?
I never thought they would, because they had other intentions, I do know.
And
In fact, in 1935, by the way, I went back to visit them. Back home,
yes.
you know. And I had a small camera in Paris, which I took along to Germany, visiting my folks. And someone saw me using it. And right away they came checking what this spy from France is doing here, but walking around with a camera, can you imagine?
In 1935.
35, yes. And as this man left,
So you were a 16-year-old spy from France.
yes, I went to my aunt in Frankfurt. I took the train, which wasn't far, went to Frankfurt. And the next day, I took the train back to Paris. And as I passed that town, Saarbrücken, which is at the border, it was a relief, I was out. I was gone. Because for sure, they would have caught me then, thinking that I'm spying or whatever. So that was the end of my visit. It was the last time I saw the place.
What did happen to your mother and father? They continued to stay on in Germany?
They stayed and they left Germany in 38. They went to London, where they waited for going to the United States.
To join
My
your
sisters were in the United States, and they also had in mind, of course, from way back, also to go there, naturally.
And you were in Paris still?
I was in Paris, exactly, and every year there were summer vacations, and one of the years I visited my sisters. They were in London, and after that, again, and in particular in 1939, I went to London to visit my folks. The whole family was there.
Did you have any thoughts in 38, let alone 39, about impending war or about a situation in Europe that would be very bad for Jews, in particular in Germany?
Yeah. I would say in Paris they didn't think. They had no inkling as to what was coming on. They couldn't realize as to how the Germans, not even though they were hated, the French didn't dislike the Germans utterly. They called them les Boches, which means some kind of derogatory term. They had the French Jews, no, they did not have any inkling as to what's coming up, even though they maybe knew what was going on, because after all, refugees were there from Germany. In Paris, they knew that they left. But the war, not at that time, I don't think.
It sounds like what you're describing is that if there was some bad things happening in Germany, that's Germany, and things are okay in France. And
in France, I don't recall. Maybe I was too ignorant or too young to worry about it. I was away. I was well adjusted. I went to school and had
What were you studying at this point in school?
Nothing in particular. I went to high school.
General education.
Yes, that's right.
What
Later on,
happened?
I specialized in. Later on, I specialized at the beginning. It was at the infancy of radio engineering and so forth. But I didn't pursue that.
What happened next?
Well, after that, as I said, I went to London.
You
on a
visited
visit
London?
my folks
Yes.
in London, and having in mind returning to Paris on the 1st of September 1939 to go to school. That's what the day when school started in Paris. And so it happened, the war broke out on that Friday, September 1st, 1939. And my dad said, "Don't go back, stay here."
So you didn't go back to Paris?
No, never saw it again. I should say, yes, I was there recently, but
Yeah.
no, in his great wisdom, how he foresaw all this, I don't know. So I stayed in London and came 1940, I think it was. Germany, you know, arming, marching, threatening. After having invaded on the 1st of September, invaded Poland, war broke out, and later on, as we know, they invaded France. Not by going through the Maginot Line, which the French thought this is the ultimate solution to protecting France, because it was a very strong, well fortified defense line. But Hitler, you know, he went through Belgium, went around the line, and that was the end of it, you know.
Yes.
So it was a tragedy. I think the French, who did not suspect at all what was going on, not at all. They were living there in comfort, the milieu I was in, not thinking of any possible tragedy. And they must have suffered greatly, because they went to southern France, trying to escape from the Germans in Paris. And as you know the story, in France, they went, many of them were caught in this town called Drancy, sent to concentration camps, so forth. And
Was your uncle one of them? Was he caught?
he survived because he went south to southern France. He survived the war. Yes. And a great tragedy happened then. My uncle had 3 children. A daughter, who was already married, she was a medical doctor, and 2 sons. And the younger son went into the, eventually, in the resistance, Jewish resistance. And he was a well-known freedom fighter. He was a famous man in this, he was a boy, I should say. And as I visited France last year, I went to that synagogue I mentioned on the Rue de Montevideo. I see a plaque there with the names of his name and his cousin also, whom I know was a larger part of the family, because that family always assembled in on the various, particularly on Pesach, on Passover, in my uncle's place. And yeah, that name was there because he, after making false papers for people to escape, eventually was caught, or somebody, it's a great tragedy. The man was tortured. In fact, I can show you 2 books which I have, which are called the Résistance Juive en France.
Pastor.
And he is written up in many ways, in many pictures and by language. Boy was killed, and that, of course, affected my uncle. That was the end of him, you know. And his son, loving son, was killed in the war. So anyhow, the others were surviving the war, and eventually they actually passed away a natural death.
Let's get back to you in England. At this time, your mother and father are there with you. Are you living with them?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes.
And what happened then?
Well, we had, I say, not I, and other refugees emanating from Germany or in other places. had to register because they had foreign passports. I had a German passport. I was an enemy alien by virtue of having such a passport. The fact that you were a Jew or not didn't come into the picture at all. The English the British got afraid, evidently, of Hitler's intentions. After he overran France, he had certainly in mind invading England, which he didn't do. He went east instead. And England, then we had registered, and one day we had a report. We were advised that we will be sent away. We will be, excuse me.
Is this your parents as well as you?
No. They, having been elderly people at the time, with facilities or papers to go to the States, they stayed there.
So
They
you're saying your
stayed
parents
until they left.
stayed in England until they emigrated to America.
Exactly.
Do you remember when it was that they went to America?
Well, it must have been 1940 or thereabouts. Yeah, 40, yeah.
You remember them going?
Oh, I already had them. I had left.
You had
I
left
was
them.
interned already, and they were still there.
So you're saying that you were interned in England?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, we had a report. By we I meant, as I said, many others of similar
German
background,
Jews.
German Jews, other Jews. Later on we met, because we met in various places, and there were people from all over the place coming from other origins. There were the Lubavitcher coming from Shanghai, also interned, ending up in Montreal at the time. We were interned in a race court called Kempton Park outside London. We stayed there on mattress and straw, I don't know, I don't remember. We had
How many
mattress and
people were there?
a few hundred, I would imagine, yes. Or more, I didn't see the scope when
At
it was
this
involved
race course?
Pardon?
At the race course?
Yes.
The tents?
Hundreds, not tens, no.
No,
Hundreds.
were there tents? A
Oh,
tent
no, we were in stables.
in the stables?
Yes, on the concrete floor.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And we
Were there guards?
Little while, always guards. Internment camps were guarded, always barbed wire around, with guardhouses and soldiers and so forth. You couldn't go. Nobody could get in. Nobody could get out.
Do you remember when you were interned? When it started?
What month? I don't know.
Yes.
1940. Yes. France was overrun. England was afraid. The Germans were interned. I mean, the Jewish refugees.
Uh-huh.
Interned. A little later. I remember I was trying to work. I never got there.
Tell us what life was like in an internment camp.
Well, at the beginning, like Kempton Park, it was nobody knew anyone. You didn't know other people. You were by yourself. You didn't know what you do in the afternoon or what was coming up. One was wondering what's going to happen. So it was somewhat, one was concerned and apprehended. It was somewhat frightful.
Well, you
left the family already. We left my parents, my sisters. And my sisters, I don't know whether they were gone already. Maybe they were not there anymore. I'm not sure. They were already gone to
America.
Maybe not. I don't know. Yeah. And I, in that camp, Kempton Park, yes. Then, shortly afterwards, not too long, a couple of months maybe, we were sent to the Isle of Man.
Before you talk of the Isle of Man, let's try to understand better what life was like in the
Kempton Park.
What was the food like?
Disorganized, no organization, one didn't know. One met new people, one never met. Evidently, we talked to each other, trying to relate our stories, where we come from, and so forth. There was no other organizational type of activity. There was nothing. We weren't there long enough. We were just new prisoners, if you will. And we kind of tried to find ourselves. Never mind what was going on otherwise.
As a citizen who was living happily in France, what did you come to think of this? You're in an internment camp, like a prisoner.
Absolutely. It was a shock. That's to say the least. I don't know. We didn't know what was coming up. You know.
Was there basic sanitation if you're living in a stable?
Yes, I would imagine. I don't recall exactly. I know better the next stage, the next station where we went.
How were you treated? Were you treated fairly?
Yeah, there was no particular mistreatment as such. We had to do what we had to do. You're a prisoner and you do as you're told.
And what was it that you had to do? Were there any duties?
Not at that time. It was not organized. Even the British were not yet experts at locking up people, who were not soldiers. You know? No.
Okay, you mentioned the Isle of Man.
Mm-hmm.
When did that happen? You were transferred? Is that it?
Absolutely, yes. As a matter of fact, I forgot to mention that at the time, I do remember in London, there were already these balloons, a barrage of balloons, anti-aircraft balloons, Zeppelins, if you will. They were masses of these things. They figured they would prevent the airplanes to come to London, you know. Many of them, yeah. And people at the time got already mobilized, evidently. Now, then we came to the Isle of Man, and
you say we. How many people?
The whole group who were at the time.
100?
Could be, yeah. Hundreds, few hundred. And every time we went to a new place, there were more, because they came from other places.
How did you get there?
The details I don't know, but we came there by boat. We went on a boat, we went to an island, to the city called Douglas. That's the capital city of the island. And they had partitioned off a bunch of hotels wherein we were settling down. Hotels, because this was a resort town. Of course, nobody was there, empty hotels. We went in there, and that was it. And we settled down and again tried to establish, you know, every little thing. I remember walked around trying to see, maybe you find a mirror somewhere. We had nothing. You know, maybe in the hotel we find a mirror to look into the mirror. That's where it was.
Were you free
the
to
funny
leave
thing was, if you found you were looking for some toilet paper. There was nothing. Maybe you find that, you know.
Were you able to leave the hotel?
That was a whole area. It was not just one hotel. It was a hotel area. Several streets. A city, a block, a small city block was petitioned off, barbed wire, and guards, entrance.
Really? So you're saying it was closed in?
Always. We were prisoners, let's put it this way. We were not...
You were not free to go to other areas of the city?
Oh, no. Not at all. We were not able to leave the double or triple row of fences of barbed wire and floodlights. Oh, no possibility of that. Couldn't get out. The funny thing, I do remember, already one had in mind then, I do remember on that island, I think it was, I found a great coat, you know, an army coat. And I was always hiding this thing, figuring that maybe, and a compass I found. I was thinking maybe there comes a time when I need this when you never know. You're thinking of God knows what. Maybe we wanted to escape. Maybe the Germans would be coming or something would happen. But we got settled down very well. By we, I mean then we already get to know each other. There was a certain group of Jewish boys. We got to know each other well. Some of them evidently settled well in Canada.
Which language did you speak then?
English. He spoke English. Maybe the odd, I would imagine. I was not inclined to speak German because I had already forgotten it, so to speak.
What was life like there?
We walked. We did not work at the time, I recall. Not on the island, not on the Isle of Man.
What type of attitudes did you and the other boys that were there with you have concerning internment by the English. You know that the Germans are trying to win a world war, that it's dangerous for Jews in Germany. The British, who are supposed to be people who are fighting against the Germans, have put you in prison and these other boys. Did you understand this? What were your thoughts?
We understood that, first of all, we had a German passport. From that point of view, we realized, well, they locked us up. We were hoping and could possibly not understand why would they pick on Jewish people, the victims, the very victims of Hitler, and lock them up. But I suppose we reasoned at the time, who had amongst the British the time to analyze or to really select as to who might be or might not be, who pretends to be a Jew and who is with Hitler or not. You know, you could know.
What were conditions like there as far as sanitation, health, food?
Sanitations, well, it having been a hotel, there was running water. You know, there were washrooms. And the food was absolutely horrible. Every single day we had rice with this dried fish. Terrible, salted dried fish. Every day, day in, day out. While we were there.
That?
Terrible food. Terrible. We survived it. There was no shortage of that stuff.
No one starved, you're saying?
No, there was no question of that, no.
Do you remember the attitudes of any of the British people that you came in contact with, guards? Were these people, how did they treat you?
Not badly, not badly.
Fine.
As long as you didn't step out of line, so to speak. You do. If you go there somewhere where they didn't want, they would tell you don't go there. Well, you did that. If you try to be smart, that would not have worked out.
It sounds, though, like you're saying you didn't see anybody brutalized or
Absolutely not.
Good.
No.
Okay.
No. They were not frontline soldiers. They were kind of, you know.
You said you came from an Orthodox background. Did you yourself, any of the other Jewish boys, carry on any traditions, prayers?
Absolutely.
You did everything
Definitely.
that you wanted
Definitely,
to do?
yes. In particular, I mean, later on, when we came to Canada, of course. But there too. It always took time to get organized and to get, but there were times the Jewish boys came together, they selected each other. Those who were more religious than others, they maintained, and don't forget, they found also consolation in this community of faith. You knew that you were Jewish, you know. They knew why you were there.
How long were you there for?
The other men? Well, it must have been 1940 or so. Not too long, really. Months. So maybe a few months, not a year.
And what happened next?
Well, we learned, or we heard, because rumors are always in these assemblies, you know, from the soldiers or from one way or the other. We learned that we were going away. We didn't know where, but we were sent away. And we later on heard it was either Australia or Canada. And we didn't know where we were going until we were on the boat and we saw Canadian soldiers. That's when we knew where we were going. Yes.
Do you remember what year you went to Canada then?
1940 or then, 1940, yes. 41, 40. 40, yes.
What was the trip like?
On the boat?
Yes.
We were on a Polish boat converted to a troop transport boat, and the ship's boat's name was Sobieski, and there were all these people, not only from the Isle of Man, I think. I think there were more, because the whole boat was full of people. And I remember, I don't know where I got it from. I had on that boat a sausage, which was hanging. And while we were going, I see this thing doing this. I remember this
You're
is a
laughing about it now.
funny, yeah. You laugh, yes. So then they were playing marches on the boat, and we went up to the dining room, and we got food. I forget now what. It was better than on the Isle of Man, no doubt. And but at the other end, we saw some German soldiers, prisoners of war. That was devastating, to tell you the truth. Never expected that they went as far. We didn't think they would go as far. Some would even get us in proximity of the guys.
On this boat, you're saying there were German prisoners of war?
Yes, they were on the boat. At the one end, we were in the back end, they were in the front end, or vice versa, It was a shock, but we did not go. After all, we had to eat, but we were not together eating. Chas v'cholil, as we say.
Now, where did you arrive in Canada?
Halifax. Arrived in Halifax. And for some reason or another, oh, by the way, on the way, we went with a convoy, we were not just one boat the war was on. There were destroyers and all kind of, I don't know how many, maybe nearly a dozen boats far away, all around there, gone part of a group. And we arrived in Halifax, and I remember then we were sent to Trois-Rivières.
From Halifax
by
to
train,
Quebec?
by train, overnight, going. We got a little package, a little food box. We were in Three Rivers, in Trois-Rivières, a little while, in a baseball field there, locked up to marching through, and they were all staring at these funny people there, coming and see us march. So we were there a very short while. And after that, we came to Fredericton, New Brunswick. That was a larger camp. But the facilities were not ready. And we had to walk from where we came. I remember we walked a lousy road, and our shoes, I remember my shoes had no soles anymore. I put some stuff in there to it was really bad. We arrived in that camp, and they had these H huts, in H formation. That was an army hut. Many, and some were under construction, some were ready, others were not. And we do remember there was one tap of flowing water, running water. And the people were lining up their lines to get a little water, get at the water, or drinking or washing, I don't know. It was terrible.
Did you feel you were safe at that point, or were you?
Oh, once we were out of Britain, we were in Europe, we were in Canada, we were on the other continent.
So you weren't scared for your life?
We felt, though I in the back of my mind knew already my folks in the States and Canada, we thought that eventually, unless things turned worse in Europe, which might have been, then otherwise we felt out of the whole area. No more war. Finished.
Were you able to speak to your family in America when you were in Canada, or no?
No. Later on there was a letter we got. I wrote out. Yes, later on as we settled, and that was maybe even already in this camp, which was called, by the way, in Fredericton. The camp was Camp B.
Camp B.
Yes. And there were people were organized in terms of their interests, their activities. There were Orthodox groups, there were other groups, there were people of higher learning from Austria, math professors, God knows who, all unbelievable. There was a guy he was a disciple of Freud. And he told us about psychoanalysis, so we took it all in.
Sounds like you were getting educated.
Well, we had to do something when we were allowed to do it, and of course the idea was to keep busy. They always tried to keep us busy. That was the moral.
Were there books or magazines? Was there
Not
work
at the
to do?
Not at the beginning. There was nothing. There was nothing.
To keep busy, though, I'm just wondering,
Oh,
was
we
there
had to work.
construction?
Yes. Well, we had to work. Apart from our own entertainment,
Doing what? Working at what?
We went out of the camp guarded, and we had to chop down trees, felling trees. And each one had an axe with two sides, and very sharp. I remember that because some people cut their feet because they're extremely sharp. Some of the soldiers were showing them how to sharpen the axes on a grindstone, and then he tried to shave like that. Yeah, that's how sharp the axe was. After he did that, I remember that. So anyway, we went there and chopped the trees, marched in and out, and that's what we did. Funny thing, I one day saw an animal crawling around, I remember. And I got after that, take off my coat. And all these coats had, by the way, a red dot in the back. In case we escaped, they knew whom to shoot or where to shoot. So anyhow, I took off my coat and went over that animal. It was a porcupine. And it was, in one's youth and total inactivity to do anything. So took that thing and I got some quills in my finger. I had to go to the hospital to take him out. Hospital, when I say there were some some Jewish doctors there, who were running. There was a dentist, and there was also a medical hut where you were treated if you were sick. So that was mainly what was done. Then you saw, for instance, the Lubavitch group was learning, and then they also had to work. So the soldiers came in, chased them out of the place, and they went out one way and they walked around, went back to the other, and the front door, so to speak, there's several doors to these huts.
It doesn't sound like it was a very difficult time.
No, it wasn't. It was not, we did that.
So compared to, let's
we
say...
We were not wood fellers or wood choppers, but we did it, and it wasn't a hard time. It was no internment camp. Nobody was killed on the way. We may have had no shoes or whatever, which we got later on anyhow. And there was a dining hall, one building where we went to eat, and then we got soldiers' rations. Excellent food. Not anymore the fish and the dried fish and rice of the Isle of Man.
Did you ever have a chance to talk to any of the Canadians who were guarding you at that time to talk about the situation?
They didn't discuss, they didn't know there was at all. Soldiers, or what was his name, Richie. But he had not the foggiest idea as to what he was doing anyhow. I remember that each one kept their belongings, whatever it was, because you couldn't take anything. They were guarding them with their body, each one. I had a little suitcase, and I had the chance to build a chair, an armchair like this, out of wood, which we find around because we were building huts and stuff, so we walked around, and I made that armchair, and it was hollow underneath, so I built in my suitcase underneath. But it's just a funny story, so to speak. And I see every day this guy, Richie, the soldier, guarding us, sitting on that chair. Everyone in our group, they were always laughing. They said, he's guarding your suitcase, Anyhow, so it was, so we had some lectures, and there's Dr. Bean, that was his name, and other activities. A lot of other groups, I didn't know them all. Some were groups, there were religious groups, and as I say, there were other groups of people who entertained themselves, each other,
So this was Camp B.
Camp B,
How long were you here?
Camp.
How long did you stay in camp?
Quite a while. I can't figure, 7 months, maybe 9 months, 6 months, 9 months, I would imagine. More, maybe.
What happened after Camp B?
After Camp B came Camp I.
And where was that?
That was on the Île Noire. Île Noire, which means Nut Island, which is which is in Saint-Jean, near Montreal, on the Richelieu River, we were on that island. Couldn't get off the island. And on that island there was a fortress, old fortress from the American Wars, you know, Fort Lennox. And there was a moat around this fort and a bridge. I think it was a drawbridge, or used to be anyhow, to get into the fort. And in that fort there were these buildings, these old style, 2-story brick, stone buildings, army buildings, like you see in the movies sometimes, you know. Yeah. And there was a moat around and there were casemates. And there were washrooms at the time, they were there, but sanitary conditions were not. We were sitting on latrines in the casemates, you know, these things where we had to go in there, and everybody was sitting there, you know, doing their, and we had to empty also these buckets for, and I remember.
This wasn't as deluxe.
Not as deluxe, particularly. I remember, made a lot of fun, a good sense of humor. Dr. Michael is a biochemist, and I don't know where he ended up actually. And he was also, evidently, we were joking and making fun of all this business, you know, which wasn't so funny, but nevertheless, it was nothing serious. We were young, we knew where we were going anyhow. We didn't think that we would forever stay there. And so, Camp I.
Since this is so close to Montreal, have you ever been back?
Indeed. Jewish Congress got hold of us being here in Montreal. We got books. And then we heard that we could indeed study for matric. Can you imagine? That was already fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
So what we did exactly that. But, of course, there were already people. There was this guy Blair. He was at the time the foreign minister under the King government, a real anti-Semite. We knew about him because he was actually the chief of these internment camps, you know, at the time. So evidently there was always discussions with the commandant of the camp, who had meetings with the representative of the camp, of our representative. So we knew what they were planning, what they were doing, what was going on. We were asking for things and couldn't get them. Eventually, of course, as I say, the Canadian Jewish Congress, that was already big hope and progress. When we heard, when we got the books, we were able to study. Eventually, even kosher food in the camp, can you imagine? So it was a tremendous group of Orthodox activities, or whichever, I mean, religious activities. Some of them beautiful professional singers, you know, beautiful on Yom Kippur, for instance, tremendous services, you know. I remember a guy from Vienna. So that was that. Others were learning, the Lubavitchers were learning, and then one man particularly is still around here, Henry Bieberfeld, Dr. Henry Bieberfeld, not a biochemist, I think he was a chemist. He was actually part of the Ivata here, in the realm of chemistry and food chemistry, you know. So he was extremely learned because his father was a rabbi in Berlin. Beautiful man. I met him in Miami last year. And he gave lectures, you know, shiurim, as it's called in Hebrew. So that was very, very good. And then I remember my neighbor in Montreal passed away, unfortunately. The man I knew for a lifetime, so to speak, because he was interned with me. He lived next to it wasn't my neighbor in Montreal, so I knew him longer than anybody else. He passed away, and this young man, he was actually studying alone with Rabbi Kalabach, who was in Senekath, the rabbi of Senekath. Today his son is there, but he was the one who started the community, so to speak, organized now we knew him very well, and he was with us.
Were you able to study, you personally, in Camp I, something that was useful for you?
Of course.
Yes.
The trick was very useful for me.
Uh-huh.
So we did study literature, and I don't know, I still know the poems I learned by heart.
Did you write exams there?
No. We were able to come to Montreal to write exams, can you imagine? That was already progress.
Were you
Manna from heaven.
Were you still interned at this time? Did you have
Absolutely.
to go back? You went back to the camp?
We went to St. Helens Island for a week. Right here, under the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
We wrote matric.
And when you were finished, you went back?
When we finished, we went back. But this was the beginning of the end already. You know.
How long were you at Camp I for? Months or a year?
No, maybe that long. I don't want to overstate, because if I say a year, then it sounds like it was several years. The whole thing was not more than 2, I would imagine.
When did you leave Camp I?
In 1942.
Well before the end of the war.
And one fine day after that, I don't know on what occasion, we came to Montreal. We were received at the Montefiore Club, of all places. You can imagine.
This is a Jewish club in Montreal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Downtown, yeah.
This was, you're saying you were released from
No, we were not yet. We came back. But why I think it was those who actually passed the matric or whatever it was. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and
So
we came here, and of course it was
you were
strange
toasted.
because we were for a couple of years there. We were in the filthy atmospheres of those camps, and suddenly we come to a nice place, and it was strange. The country in itself was already strange, you know, like a newcomer. And number 2, here we come to this place. As a matter of fact, there was somebody there I remember later on, I met later on. So then we went back. Eventually we got out, and as I got out, lo and behold, I got into McGill, you know. And what did they do? Within a week.
McGill is a university here in Montreal.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, yes. McGill University. And what they did was, at McGill, all these boys at McGill had to go to officers' training. Doesn't matter where they come from. They were students at McGill at the time, particularly in engineering. Officers' training. So I was locked up the week before, behind barbed wire on the Isle of Man, with a dot on my back, so it's somebody, a red dot, so I don't escape. I come to Montreal, go to McGill, and boom, they started giving uniform, and we
You're
had to
training
march.
to be an officer for
Absolutely,
Canada.
yes, 2 weeks. Then every twice a week.
What did you think of the irony of this situation?
There's a Yiddish expression, even though I don't speak it too well. But, of course, I learned Yiddish while I was in Canada for the last half century. And the only thing I said, "Meshigat Mazan," which means it must be crazy, absolutely. You know, tremendous. But then I met in that year when we went into McGill, first time, a lot of engineering students, Jewish students, and they all became friends, you know.
Were you in university residences at that time?
No.
Where were you staying? Where you were living?
I was staying, first I started, I rented a place in Hutchison, Esplanade, God knows what in the city, people who rented out their rooms.
Where was the money to pay for this?
I had my folks in the States.
You were in touch with your parents?
Oh, at that time already, yes,
Yes.
yes. So when I got out, and even before I received the odd letter, but then I got out. And also I got some assistance from the late Saul Hayes. I mean, not assistance, monetary assistance, I mean assistance in terms of, he was Secretary General of the Canadian Jewish Congress, right? Saul Hayes, a fine man. And anyway, I just mentioned that I knew him. I got to know him because for Canadian Jews, it was also a novelty to have these guys come from Europe over suddenly a new aliyah, shall we say, coming to Canada. A bunch of Jewish boys.
Were there other Jewish boys who were helped by the Canadian Jewish Congress at that time?
I wouldn't know directly. I don't know. One thing I do know was that many boys I knew got help by families in Canada, either taking them in or sponsoring them or so forth. Sure.
Not their own families. You're saying
no, not their own families.
Strange families.
Downtown. Various other people I do know. They took in some of the boys who then also got established, got to be business people here.
How did your studies go?
Quite well.
Good?
Yes.
So you enjoyed studying at McGill University?
I enjoyed because for me it was a challenge. It was not a question of maybe I failed or maybe I don't. There was no such thing. I had to. That's what made it easy. The youth today don't know what to do. I know what the motivation is. They got rich parents, or they don't know what the hell, what they're going. But the boys who came out of those camps, they knew they couldn't fail. They had to do either study or go in business or do the right thing to get themselves established, which they did.
What was your perception at that time when you were studying at McGill? The war was still happening in Europe. Were people here worried about the outcome of the war? Were there fears that Britain could be overrun and perhaps the war would spread?
1940.
I'm thinking
it was already starting to be at the end of the war. Towards the end of the war. By the way, we had to go to Petawawa to army camp during the summer.
This is Petawawa is an army camp.
Yes, it's yes.
This was to do with your officer training classes.
Absolutely, yes. Funny, I got a picture there to show you.
Good.
And while also during the summer, when I went to school, to university, a group of boys we couldn't get work for some reason or another. We couldn't get work. We got work in McDonald's College on the farm. So we all went to the farm. A whole bunch of people went to the farm there. And there were various faculties. The boys from McGill went to work there. One guy in architecture became the dean of the University of British Columbia in architecture. And others who became good students, good citizens, successful Canadian Jewish business people.
What, for you, what was significant, if anything, about the end of the war? You were safe here in Canada. Your parents were in the States.
It was a great feeling. Elation. It was. All I can say, we thank the Almighty. Yep, that's the way it was. Later on it was beautiful. I got a job in Ottawa, which I didn't get because I wasn't naturalized citizen. Couldn't go. I worked in Ottawa, so I worked with a British company. Later on, I got into a company of consulting engineers.
Let's, for a moment, stay with just after the war. You were very fortunate. Your family survived. Your sisters and your mother and father. Did you hear of other Jews in your town? What happened to some of them?
Yes.
What were the outcomes?
Absolutely. Yes. I have a little book which was written by a guy in this town where I was born, which I received from another Loebenberg from Cape Town in South Africa. Second cousin who lived in my town, in Cape Town. And he was, as a matter of fact, he became the boss of the Woolworth affiliation with this clothing business from London. What do you call this? Whatever it was. And he sent this little booklet to my sister in New York. She sent it to me, so that's why I have this. It's written in German, and as a matter of fact, he writes me once a year, and he had it translated in English, but I haven't got the English translation as yet. And in that book is described various contemporary members of the Jewish community in this town, starting, by the way, starting even in 1900 and 1600, whatever it was. I didn't show it here. No? So that's one in Cape Town. Then I have his cousin.
What? Just to interrupt for a moment. This book, did it tell you what the outcomes were of the Jewish people that were living in your town? In addition,
Yes,
what happened?
They all left. They all left.
They left.
There was none there. They all left, and they went to various places around the globe.
So you're saying many of them, or survived?
Well, several went to South Africa. Another member of my, not immediate but remote family, went to Chicago at the time, and now they settled down in St. Petersburg. And in fact, strangely enough, this man, Walter Loebenberg, not only did he build a old people's home in the name of his mother, but he also starts up doing a Holocaust museum somewhere in Tampa, I think. So he was well off, but a successful man. And various other people who left went to, as I say, South Africa, the States, of course.
So it wasn't difficult to leave, to leave your town if they wanted to?
They left in time. They seemed to have the inkling or to do the right thing. They left. They left under various circumstances.
Other than your family in France that you described, some of the members died. Did you have other family that did not survive?
I had some uncles. They didn't survive, but doesn't mean that they were necessarily in camps. They might have died a natural death. I don't know, really, I don't know.
So really what we're saying is you were a very lucky family.
Extremely lucky. Yeah. It's wonderful. We came to Canada. Yes.
How did you meet your wife?
How do I meet her? When I went to McGill, I went to meet quite a few young ladies at the time. But strangely enough, I felt necessarily I had so much luck in this whole business. I owe it to share this with someone who was there. And so it happens. I met my wife in Senegal while she actually came from Sweden, finding her relatives in Buffalo, New York. Her relatives, I mean not the immediate family, I mean some uncles who were there, they knew that she was, they knew already that she was in Sweden. She was liberated in Sweden from the internment camps in Germany. Sweden, then she couldn't go to the States right away, so she came to Canada. And one fine day, her uncle from New York, one of the uncles, came here, and they went to Senegal. I happened to be in Senegal. So I met her in the water, so that was it. So I met her, that's it. She had a different story from mine. She went through the camps. She was 13, 14, her parents and 4 brothers disappeared. You see, she
They
was
died.
alone.
You're saying they died
Or in the
camps.
camps, I don't know where. You see.
Uh-huh.
They were
You've
murdered.
You've had children? How many children
My
do
own
you
children?
have?
Yes. I have 3 children. My daughter is in Israel. And she has 4 children. My son is in Israel. He got 5. And I have one son who is here, Montreal. He has 1. So I have altogether 10.
So you're a very happy grandfather. Yeah.
Indeed. Yep. Beautiful. It was something. And coming out McGill, I went to business of my own later on. I mean, it's been very nice. Very nice.
You said engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had your own
Oh, yes.
business? Was
Oh,
that?
yes. I made many an electrical plan for all these Jewish developers in this town. Builders, there were not nobody who built this town. The newcomers and the Jewish people who built. I remember it was when they built in 1948 or 50 maybe or thereabouts, the Montebello apartment on Kutzenberg Road. A Jewish family developer did that, and I was on the 10th floor of the building when it was built, and I looked downtown over Montreal, and what do I see? I see the Sun Life building, and nothing else was there. You know that? There was nothing there. Not one high-rise building. The building I was standing on, which was a 10-story building, which is still there, Montebello Apartments, was the highest building in town.
What year was this?
1952, 3, 4, whatever. Yeah. And ever since, these many Jewish people who came over here who had nothing. And they were selling, many of them, by the way, were selling stuff, merchandise to farmers outside the farms. And eventually they bought some of the farms. And there was, it was a very good business when they started developing on their own. And they were building in this town unbelievable. I don't know what and they came to me because there weren't too many electrical engineers in this town. So I did many of those things. Not this building though. This was Arthur Mendel who did that. Yeah.
Mr. Loebenberg, you've told us your story, and in many ways it's a story that has had good fortune and good luck. Is there anything in thinking about your experience through the war, your family's experience, are there any further thoughts that you would want to add pertaining to those experiences that you had, or in general about the Holocaust or the war?
The Holocaust was something I circumvented, kind of, fortunately. And Canada, I remember there was anti-Semitism here. I remember in Seneca, when I mentioned, there was the Laurentide Inn. There was a sign there, dogs and Jews not allowed, at the beginning of this, when I came here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, so not everything was rosy. The Jews were not always having the prestige they have today until, you see, Bradford paid off McGill and built buildings there and so forth in his name. Today, the situation is fine, but as we know, we have new problems of a different nature. So, in the overall, it was just a tragedy, the way the families were totally disrupted, killed, murdered. And the survivors, many of them have a hard time. And you know, they, even though it would appear it's fine, they're well dressed, live well, have nice apartments, nice buildings, nice houses, and so forth. But they're still overcome with the trauma of that war, where they lost their families and suffered in the camps. My wife's story is unbelievable. Not that I ask her to tell it to me, I know. So this is very sad. This is something, what can you do? We don't believe it. Even they, the survivors, don't believe it. The ones who were there in the camps don't believe what they went through. Oh, yes. My parents were very fortunate, so that I went to New York. They passed away there. My father was he was 92 and he's buried in New Jersey. Every time I pass by New York, I go to the cemetery, to my parents' cemetery. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you, Mr. Loebenberg. This has been Stephen Cohen and Myrna Wiener interviewing Mr. Loebenberg about his experience. The videographer today has been Barry Stallman. This interview will be deposited in the archives of the Montreal Holocaust Memorial Center. Thank you, Mr. Loebenberg.
Thank you.
You were going to
What
say?
about the things he has to show
Yeah.
after?
Yeah, we take a break.
Yes, this is my father. His name was Herman Loebenberg, a man of great stature, very smart, president of a shul, of a community, the city council of my hometown. Very fine man, really respected. And he emigrated to the States and then lived for many years in New York. He was still active in business, and he had a very fine life to the age of 92, which is a very promising age. So he passed away at quite a while back. He and my mother, of blessed memory, they're both buried in New Jersey. And I evidently, whenever I pass by the region, which is at least once a year, I certainly come to see the cemetery to pay them my respects. Oh yes, here, this is a postcard showing my house, my father's house of where I was born. And he was born in that house. And there was a balcony, and I remember I was sitting on that balcony with my grandmother of blessed memory. And the bottom part of it is the entrance to the store which he had. And next to this house is another house where there were some Loebenberg, some remote cousins. They were living there. And going around the corner where we seen the face of another building that was some kind of a hotel. But just to tell you that, of course, I know the details of this place inside out, even though I have not returned to it since the year I left it. I may next year go there, not necessarily see that, but to visit the grave of my grandparents who were buried in a nearby town called Aufenau, near Bechtersbach, which this is. Yeah. Yes, this is the cover of a book, Contribution à l'histoire de la résistance juive en France, which of course is very interesting for someone who lived there. And inside you find my cousin Maurice Loebenberg, who died. In fact, when he did die, several years later, he got a decoration by the French government where the citation says, Mort pour la France, because he made false papers, first of all, for many immigrants who escaped France during the occupation. Yes, here is a photograph of my cousin Maurice Loebenberg of blessed memory. And he this is an extract of the book printed edited in 1947. And Morris, who was a freedom fighter, he saved, from what I read, thousands of people who escaped, and he was a courageous man. The citation, if one reads the details of the book, testifying to that effect. And at the end of the war, close to the end of the war, not evidently, but he was found by the Gestapo, who tortured and killed him, and that was his end. Yes, this is again, my cousin Morris, the son of my uncle, with whom I lived for 5 years in Paris. Now all these people were wonderful people, wonderful family. Morris, actually, he started out with Gestetner in the duplicating business from London, and he was a representative of that company, Gestetner, in a larger part of France. And so it happens when I left Paris, I have never seen him again because he was murdered. But to just look at that picture, it's unbelievable memories of better years. Yeah. Yes, this is a rendition by a local artist of the entrance to Fort Lennox on Île Noire, where we were interned. Now we see there the bridge going into the fort. And there was also, if I believe, there's also a drawbridge, and I do remember that we played hockey on the moat, which was frozen in the wintertime. So this was kind of a very interesting document from what we lived at during our stay on the island. There we see it very nicely, very well. Mm. Yes, this is a photocopy of an insert in the Montreal Standard in about, must be in the 40s. And the picture shows a Camp I on the in Fort Lennox on the island Île Noire. I am the third person from the left, and in the white uniform, if you will, because I was General Fairfax in a play by John Drinkwater, which was called what was the name of the play? I forget now. What is it?
Cromwell?
Oh yes, Oliver Cromwell. That's the name of the play, and that's what we did in Camp I, and various other. There's also another gentleman in the front. His name is Jack Hahn, and I think in the back is Irving Shield. He's a rabbi in Toronto, and there is also another. Oh, there's F.B. Hahn, another Hahn who's standing at the right, the second one. Well, this was most interesting. Absolutely. That's it. Yes, here again is an extract of the paper, the Montreal Standard, showing Camp I, L'Île Noire. And we see here Dr. Michael is standing at the blackboard lecturing on I think it's molecular rearrangement. He's teaching to some boys in chemistry. So that was really quite interesting. And so all the boys kept themselves occupied doing something useful, learning and preparing themselves for the day when they see freedom. Well, yes. But it came. Yes, this is an interesting photo taken in Camp Petawawa while we were on training, officers training, and here are all the schoolboys, and you can see me sitting with my hand leaning on the rail between two standing boys in the gap. That's where I am, near a soldier in a darker uniform. And we were just completing a Bailey Bridge, which is a bridge where you cross small rivers. And we put up that structure at the time in the engineers' activities at McGill. That was in 44, May 44. Mm-hmm. Oh yes, this photocopy attests to the fact that I'm not a British subject anymore, and I have become a Canadian citizen. This dates from 1947. The serial number is 0444, meaning that is at the very beginning when Canada issued these certificates of citizenship to Canada. Yes, very interesting paper. There you are. So these are my grandparents, and they lived in Berchtesbach, where I was born, and my grandfather was born there. I didn't know my grandfather, actually. He passed away already. His name was Leopold Loebenberg, same name as mine. I'm named after him. Next to that is my grandmother, Catherine, who I knew very well. She passed away in 1934, and lovely lady, very smart, and very fine character. I remember her dearly, yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, this is my dad of blessed memory. Lovely man. He was the backbone of the Jewish community in my hometown. And he was the gentleman who owned a store, general store in Berchtesbach, my hometown. And he left, he had a lot of foresight sending me away, and my sister. And he saved us all, actually. He was smart. And he was also on the city council of my hometown. And certainly when these, the non-Jewish people needed advice, they came to him. So he was a well-respected citizen of the town. And he went to New York, and he lived there many years, and he passed away some 25 years ago. Yeah. Yes, this is my late uncle Adolf Loebenberg. He lived in Paris, and he was the father of Maurice Loebenberg, who was a resistance fighter we talked about. And this man had a heart of gold. I lived there for 5 years, and he did not perish in the Holocaust. He passed away after he heard that his son was killed by the Gestapo, of course. That was his end also. And he had a daughter, Doris, and another son, and they also passed away not too long ago, in fact. And charming man. Beautiful, beautiful man. Yes. Mm-hmm. Now this is a great picture of the parents, or the family, in fact, of my wife, who is in this picture at the extreme left. And my wife's name was Fela Krimalowski, and now it is Phyllis. She's in the Navy suit, by the way, and her name is now Phyllis Loebenberg. Now, I know one of the brothers' name was Chaim. The others, I don't know the names. And they all, except my wife, perished in the Holocaust. At the beginning of the war, they were all shipped in these camps, and they disappeared. I don't know what happened to them. Yes, big tragedy. This is a picture of my father at the right. In about 1960, I would say it was taken, or thereabouts. And next to him is my sister Dora, my older sister. And she is still alive, by the way, in New York. And next to her is her husband Arthur, Arthur Stern. So there's Arthur Stern and Dora Stern. And he passed away some good 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I don't remember exactly. Yes. Yes, this is a photograph of the 50s. And you see, we used to live there on Alexis Neon Boulevard in Saint Laurent. And you see, first of all, my father with his wife, my mother, blessed memory. And next to them is my wife, and there's the little boy, and his name is Ronnie. Well, this is an interesting family picture. When they visited us from New York in Saint Laurent. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is a wedding picture of myself and my wife in the center. Her name is Phyllis, and my name Leopold. And then there is the rest of the family, not all of them, but certainly my sister at the extreme right, and my sister Anne, with her husband David Baranker. Then to my wife Phyllis's left is my father, Herman Loebenberg. My mother next to him, Lia Loebenberg. And then my sister Dora Stern, and her husband Arthur. And there are two children, and they are Jane and Jeanette. And of course, they're grown-up ladies today. Yes. Well, this is my wife Phyllis, and myself. I do not recall the occasion. Maybe it was a wedding, or it must have been a bar mitzvah, maybe. Way back when. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. This is a delightful picture of my sister Anne and her late husband David Baranker. And my sister still lives in New York. David, unfortunately, he passed away, buried in New Jersey. Yes, lovely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Here's a picture taken at the same time in 1972 at the bar mitzvah of my son Eric. And at the left is my sister, my older sister Dora, still living in New York. And next to her is her husband Arthur Stern. He passed away many years ago. Yes, this is my youngest son Eric, sitting on his front steps in NDG with his wife Bosmat Loebenberg, and my little granddaughter Laura Loebenberg. Bosmat comes from Israel, by the way. Beautiful. This is a picture of recent date taken in Israel at my son's Ronnie's home at the bar mitzvah of my grandson Natan. And you have my daughter Beatrice, next to her husband Abraham, and the two grandchildren, their children, and there's Sivan and Maya. Beautiful. By the way, their name is Zolty. That's the family name. 4 Zoltys. Good. Beautiful photo of my 3 children. You have Beatrice at the right, and the center is Ronnie, and at the left is Eric. Eric lives in Montreal. The other 2 are in Israel. Yes, interesting bar mitzvah picture of recent date in Israel, my son's home. At the extreme left is I, next to my son Ronnie, and then my wife Phyllis, And then comes Yaacov, one with a hat. And then my daughter-in-law, Batya. And then come the 4 children, namely Moshe, and then Natan, the bar mitzvah boy. And then comes Shifra and Elisheva. Well, last but not least, this is my oldest granddaughter, Elli, and she just was inducted in the Israeli army, and she finished now. She's finished the army last year. It's wonderful, and well, this is the global picture of the family. Leaving the old country, leaving Germany, coming to New York, going to Israel, and then here's a fighter, my daughter in the Israeli army. Beautiful, absolutely. That's